Mr. Harker, I'm glad that you've arrived safely.
Count Dracula.
I am Dracula, and I welcome you to my house.
This is Mike Price, author of the Forgotten Horrors series of movie history books. While touring in 1999 to promote a 20th anniversary edition of the original Forgotten Horrors, I had the good fortune to connect with Christopher Lee, the title player of Hammer Films' 1958 production of Dracula, also known as Horror of Dracula. Lee had a book of his own to promote, the U.S. edition of his autobiography, Tall, Dark, and Gruesome. Turned out that Lee and I found plenty of interests in common. Never mind that George Turner's and my Forgotten Horrors volume covered a period in history before Lee's time. And never mind that Hammer's Dracula had launched a franchise that would never run any risk of becoming forgotten. Not that I would object if some of my Dracula portrayals might vanish, Lee told me, but then you might find it necessary to place them in one of your Forgotten Horrors books and have the blasted things rediscovered all over again. He added this: no ingratitude on my part, mind you. That 1958 Dracula, like its companion Frankenstein picture at Hammer, rescued me from studio casting discrimination. I was considered too tall for conventional leading man roles, you know, and imposed upon me a horror movie stereotyping that paid off for the longer term. Once established then as a reliable presence no matter the genre, I was able to branch out while keeping my anchorage in the horrors, which meant steady work.
He must be found and destroyed.
Terence Fisher's Dracula was issued in America as Horror of Dracula, drawn like its key predecessors from Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. It is, as such, a refreshing contradiction of the utter foreignness of F.W. Murnau's 1921 Nosferatu and the stage-bound theatricality of Todd Browning's 1931 Dracula. Director Fisher and screenwriter Jimmy Sangster spared Count Dracula the inconvenience of Stoker's long sea voyage, the better to place the crucial locales within writing distance of one another. The Hammer version served in effect to make Dracula, quote, a domestic phenomenon, unquote, as the historian Phil Hardy has written, despite the stated Middle European locale and its Germanic nomenclature. Terence Fisher and camera chief Jack Asher brought to the assignment a genre-defining combination of stateliness, mannered propriety, and headlong ferocity. The effect is that of honoring the brisk economy of Universal Pictures' B-unit Gothics of the 1940s, but allowing a lingering curiosity in the settings and situations to allow for a more studied pace.
Come, let me kiss you.
If there is an underlying resemblance between the Hammer Dracula and any Universal productions of old Hollywood, it would lie in a reflection of that big studio's more extravagant matched set of The Phantom of the Opera, which Fisher would remake at Hammer in 1962, and The Climax from 1943-1944. Thus did Fisher and Asher establish a recognizable Hammer style, reinforcing and embellishing upon that tone with their collaborative The Brides of Dracula in 1960, a linear sequel notwithstanding the absence of Christopher Lee. Lee said he avoided viewing any other such pictures, the better to reinterpret Bram Stoker's vision on his own, quote, without my taking on the baggage of how any other actors had played it. I knew better than to assume the formal elegance of the Hollywood Dracula image. He continued, I could not help but read Stoker's Dracula as an erotic and romantic presence, not to mention heroic, ferocious, and mournful, what I have called the loneliness of evil. True to Lee's vision, Hammer's concept of evil is relative. Dracula hunts in search of sustenance and companionship. Peter Cushing's conventionally heroic Van Helsing pursues a fair struggle of equals. Fisher and Sangster leave the greater sadistic brutality to the massed forces of self-righteous moralistic reform. The film's indictment of forced piety is emblematic of the Hammer canon as a class, most vividly in its condemnations of English colonial oppression in John Gilling's matched set of 1966, The Reptile and Plague of the Zombies. Lee took a pass on an immediate sequel, being, quote, wary of typecasting, as he said, adding, just as I had been content to confine my Frankenstein monster to one assignment. A direct follow-through to Dracula, 1960's The Brides of Dracula, boasts return engagements for director Fisher and Peter Cushing, again as Van Helsing. Narrative references to the 1958 picture suggest a Lee presence in the backstory, while the sequel concentrates upon a descendant of the presumably destroyed Dracula, played in Edwardian Gothic style by David Peel, which is a story for another day. Until then, this is Mike Price, signing off.
In the meantime, you must lock the house, keep all the doors and windows shut, and let none of your pupils be alone at any time.